This clip is brought to you by 8 Sleep Mattresses, the temperature-controlled Tesla of beds that automates your sleep. Sleep better and enjoy this clip.
And there's a lot of paradigms, a lot of beliefs about how the body works. And at the end of it, here I am in the clinical side, and I'm not a doctor, first of all, but I practice at a high level, and I know a lot about what's going on because I took some of the best doctors, worked alongside them. Here's what artificial intelligence told me, is that in special, and what I noticed is that, at least at Human Garage, is that basically when you really look, you think that we're doing a lot of different stuff, but really they do 15 to 20 things is what they see, treat, and diagnose 80% of the time. So if you understand why that person came in, what it looks like, what you did, and what worked, that's actually the practice of medicine. The knowledge of medicine was, I went to school, I got a degree in nutrition, become a doctor, whatever, the chiropractor. But then when you get into practice is when you really learn. So I learned the practice of healthcare, not the education of healthcare, which is very, very different. And it's like that in every industry. You go to work and you become an MBA, and they go to work, and then you really learn how to work. And so education and experience has been disconnected. We weren't brought up like this. This has only been around for the last 100 years. And that's part of the education system, which is actually called the Dung Gang education system. So our education system today was brought over by China for the Industrial Revolution. It was to separate the children from the parents as long as possible so you can indoctrinate them into a set of beliefs. And yeah, I mean, this is the reality of the world we live in, and you see it because here's one thing that's interesting. I just found out that my grandfather was actually a published author in his youth. We have this unpublished book that he wrote, and it was his experience coming to America coming to Canada at 14 years old.
From where?
From England.
From England, okay.
Starting his new life, not with his parents. He's there learning about money, talking about buying food, and talking about what he's learning. And I'm like, first of all, it was written so eloquently. I mean, I could barely read it. It was so eloquently written. Because we're used to reading short text and stuff like that. And I had to take 4 or 5. Matter of fact, I had to get Cynthia to read it to me because it just was, we've lost.
That must have been amazing.
It is. As a matter of fact, the more
It's been incredible to read that.
It was, because I'm saying a 14-year-old, I mean, I'm looking around at 28, 29, 30-year-olds who don't know how to manage this stuff. And it's a 14-year-old learning and describing his experience, but the eloquence in which he did it, the communication levels. And today it's a LOL, BRB,
GTFO.
And so we've lost. So the education system has been dumbed down and consistently over years. But here's what we think: it's the best in the world. Yeah, but have them read one of the old classic novels. Somebody coming out of university today, it's hard for them to do that. Yeah, and I mean, look, I'm not beating everybody up. There's lots of smart people. I'm just saying, and there's lots of geniuses that work their way through. I'm just saying the generalized population. And so things have been shifted in the way that we perceive things in the world. Things have changed, and we've had to adapt. But adaptation over time, we don't notice. That's why we measure things. Like if it's like all of a sudden I'm eating a little too much, and it's like, holy crap, I got fat. What happened? How did that happen? And because we don't notice those little incremental bits or changes, because that's the way our brains are set up. Our brain's set up to not notice things. It's set up to move forward irrespective of the environment. And so what we've trained us is to move forward till we drop. And then when we drop, we go fix it. But I mean, go back to a car. If you only fixed your car every time it broke, I mean, it'd be pretty shitty if you're working on your brakes one day and they go off and it's like, oh, it's time to fix their brakes, but you're going down a hill at 110 miles an hour.
That's interesting what you said. Adaptation over time is something that you don't notice. And we have friends that have been on the show before, bodybuilders and stuff like that, and they've said, like, they go to the grocery store after they worked out and they kind of like, they're not even thinking, they're just like in a tank top, and people are like, oh my God, and they're not even, they're thinking, oh, I'm kind of small actually right now.
Yeah.
They're not noticing the adaptation, as you pointed out.
Well, the human brain does weird things. Like, so think about how a computer works. Our brain works like a computer. So when you go to a website, if that website's the same, every time I go back, it caches it, so it loads it faster. So I only notice what it does is it changes if they change 1 pixel or 1 point, it just changes at 1 point, so it's speedier. Well, that's what our brain does too. We only recognize difference. And so if nothing's different, we don't notice the change until about 3 weeks, which is really a perception cycle times 7, which perception cycle is 3 days, times 7 perception cycles, 3 weeks. then we go, oh, that's what happened. And that's why when we were training like athletes, like dieting, especially bodybuilders, first thing you do is take away their scale, because if they measure and they're not getting to their weight, they're going to mess it up, right? They're going to do something crazy.
Yep.
I mean, this is stuff that we learned in the 80s. But so this is why when I go look at you, if I see you all the time, I don't rebuild that picture. My brain automatically has it as a memory. And then if something changes, like, okay, what changed? Is it your hair? Is it whatever? So we're dealing with these mechanisms of how we perceive the world. And this is where we get back into where we work with fascia. Fascia is about perception, because there are things that we're meant as the animal in us, the primitive side of us, is habituated. It eats, sleeps. It's very habitual in the nature, and it's either hot or cold. The primitive nature of us is it's basically, they say fight or fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but what stops us from fighting or fucking is the emotions that go, okay, calm down here. Don't have to fight this guy. Okay, that's the emotions. That's your midbrain. That's your limbic system. But then on top of that is the perception. I was saying to you, if you perceive that your mother, your wife died, your whole body goes into shock, and whether it's true or not. And if I told you, 10 minutes later that she didn't die and it was a mistake, then your body would start coming out of shock. But it's the perception which overrides the entire human experience. So if I perceive if I have a threat that I'm in a relationship and that relationship's going to end, like let's say a woman with 2 kids, and she perceives that she's going to be left, and so she's going to be in fight or flight all day, every day. It means not digesting. When we're in fight or flight, the blood leaves the core of the body and goes to the limbs. And when it goes to the limbs, it's no longer digesting and processing and stuff like that. So I eat food. It's not processing. I'm not absorbing. It's creating waste, which is toxic to our system.
Yeah.
So perception is super important. And, the body feels, the brain informs us of what that feeling is. And that's how it works. So perception is part of the neocortex, which is the front part of the brain. And perception is really important because we're talking about pain. Like you have a history of saying, hey, don't worry about pain. And that's right, because if you don't worry about it, if I worry about pain, that 2 or 3 pain becomes a 6 or a 9. If I'm not worried about it, if I don't feel helpless, then that pain is less. So your statement was always true, because that was your mechanism to get to where you go. You had a goal, 1,080 pounds, or 1,086?
1,080.
1,080, 1,080.
1,085 actually wiped me right out.
Well, so if
extra 5 pounds.
So basically, what you're saying is you lifted the resolution on a basic plasma TV, 1,080,
right? 1080p.
1080p, yeah. So the perception is super important, and managing perception is important, and a lot of stuff goes into that, and that's part of what we teach, which is emotional awareness. Because your perception, like if somebody comes up to me and I perceive a threat, all of a sudden I'm up there and I'm ready in my face. But if that guy is just a big guy who wants to help me, and my perception is he's going to hurt me, I'm going to hear different things. The words he says are going to be different. Like your guys' generation grew up with Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Okay, who's the dude at the end that he was the evil
Voldemort.
guy? Oh, Voldemort, yeah.
Do not say his name.
Oh. Yeah. No, who was the guy at the end that was the good guy that everybody thought was the bad guy? Snape, yeah. Okay, so what it is perception is snippets of time, because it's how we catalog and use and take memories and store memories. We don't actually, our brain doesn't work linearly. It works in experiences, and then we take those experiences and we attach them to a timeline to understand. So what they do is they create this picture of this guy, Snape, who's really bad. And then they come back in and say he's a good guy. So now you have to go in your mind and go, oh, remember that, remember that, remember that. So perception rebuilds our reality, and then it informs our reticular activating system to what that reality is. And that reticular activating system then paints the way we see the world. And if you don't believe you're going to see something, or you believe you're going to see something, or you don't, your brain is job of your brain is to prove what you perceive to be true. So that's why we get into all these arguments and fights, because everybody has a perception. And in healthcare, I don't want to argue. I don't want to fight anymore. Like, I've had all the arguments. I've had all the fights. I just want to help people and help myself. And by doing that, it's changing language. It's like taking the edge off and stuff like that. I used to be very combative because I had the tools and I had the education practically to talk to people, and I could fight anybody, and they say, well, it's not that way. It's peer review says this. And I'm like, okay, well, here's 3,000 people that say differently.
Yep.
So where do we stop? And it's really just about it's really big. It's just a big dick fest. Everybody's just swinging their dicks trying to prove that they're right. And at the end of it, the world is really, really, really sick right now. We're in every state of awareness. Every disease in the history of mankind is at its peak. Cancers, fibromyalgia, sex crimes, anxiety, depression. So if you can, and I'm open to it, if you can tell me something in where we're doing better as humans right now than we were, let's say, 50 years ago or 100 years ago, I'll be open to hearing it. But usually, I've looked at this and I've looked at the stats. The one thing people say is we're living longer. And that's not true anymore. It's just that 13 years ago, they took infant mortality out of the stat pool. And so it looks like we are. It's actually slowing down the rate. But here's one thing I noticed. When I went into practice I guess it was about 12 years ago, here's a basic kind of thing. These are anecdotal things. Like an 80-year-old generally moved. Today, an 80-year-old generally doesn't move. Mm-hmm. And so if we forget about the science and all that, we just forget about what science is, what's happening with people, and we look around, we get a much different story. And what is it in science right now that we're saying, or in the world that we're saying, this is exactly the way it should be, that we're going to look back at in 10 or 20 years and say, that was freaking stupid. Like when I grew up in like northern Canada, lots of mosquitoes, like they're like clouds, like they could literally cover the sun. And so we sprayed DEET on the side of the road. And as a kid, we used to run behind it and play in the fog.
Oh no.
Well, yeah, because it was safe.
Yeah.
And then, you go back 50 yeyears earlier, and 4 out of doctors recommended Camel cigarettes because it's a healthy lifestyle. So, and if you had an ulcer, back 35 years ago, it was like because your life is too stressful, not because of a bacteria. And so that means you stop work, you can't do anything, you don't go out, It's like we make all these decisions in our world. And so I ask myself every day, what am I doing today that I'm going to look back at 10 or 20 years and say that was fucking stupid? And that's the way I live my life. Because I've now, like I said, I'm just at the age where I'm old enough now to have looked back and say that was stupid enough times that I don't want to do it anymore. And one of those things was the way I trained, the way I ate, the way I lived my life.
How'd you figure out that was stupid?
Well, you look back at it and you cause pain. It hurt somebody. It hurt me.
So Power Project family, I hope you enjoyed this clip. We are on Discord and Reddit. We're trying to talk to you guys and build a community down there. So the links are in the bio. But remember, like, comment, subscribe, share this out with people so you can share the wealth of health. As cheesy as that fucking sounds. Peace.